Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of information, and in this case, a really powerful resource focused on fluency, and give you the ultimate shortcut to being profoundly well-informed.
It's great to be here.
Today, our mission is, well, it's all about pure linguistic efficiency. We are not just adding random words to your vocabulary list.
No, not at all.
We are engaging in what I'd call targeted surgery on your speech patterns. We're providing you with the definitive tools to sound less like a learner who just knows dictionary definitions.
Right.
And much, much more like a fluent native English speaker.
And what's so fascinating here is that the source material we're diving into, it really gets that fluency isn't just about syntax or grammar, it's about cultural shorthand.
Cultural shorthand, I like that.
This deep dive is designed to deliver immediate dual benefits. So first, we're providing 20 core idioms. These are, essential linguistic and cultural shortcuts that really define native speech.
Okay, so that's the what.
That's the what's. And perhaps more critically, we're giving you a highly specific, very powerful learning technique. This technique is designed to solve what is, I think, arguably the most frustrating challenge in English language acquisition.
And what's that?
The vast, confusing chasm between how a word is written and how a native speaker actually, pronounces it.
Okay, let's unpack this and set the stage for you, the learner. We've distilled this knowledge from a dedicated resource, one that's focused entirely on boosting native fluency. And it truly is designed for quick, actionable application.
Exactly.
We have the what, the vocabulary, but I agree, we absolutely need to start with the how, the technique, because until you solve that fundamental barrier of auditory comprehension and pronunciation, mastering idioms becomes kind of pointless if you can't recognize them when they're spoken naturally.
Indeed. Our session is structured to ensure that the knowledge you gain is quick, thorough, and highly applicable starting tomorrow. We're beginning with the methodology, which addresses that root frustration of English.
And the hook you mentioned.
And to hook you in right now, yes. The initial insight involves a strange-sounding method combining reading and listening simultaneously that is outlined as the single most effective way to close that pronunciation gap.
I think we really need to give this common pain point its due focus. Because for anyone who has tried to learn English, you realize very, very quickly that this is not a cooperative, strictly phonetic language.
Not even close.
You can stare at a word on a page, you can try to sound it out based on the logic of your native tongue, or even the logic of some other English words, and still be fundamentally, gloriously wrong when you hear a native speaker say it. This is the English problem.
It's the sheer inconsistency that is the true hurdle. I mean, unlike languages such as Spanish or German, where there is a very high correlation between the spelling and the sound, English is, well, it's chaos.
Chaos is a good word for it.
The source material notes that the historical evolution of English is why this happens. We don't have to get deep into linguistic history, but just think of the Norman Conquest, or think of the Great Vowel Shift centuries later. English is essentially a language that has layers upon layers of rules and borrowings and phonetic shifts that just never consistently updated the spelling.
So you end up with these ridiculous situations. You get words spelled the same but that sound different, like read and read. Or words spelled completely differently but that sound the same, like two, and two.
And the silent letters.
Oh, the silent letters are a minefield. The K in knife, the B in debt, the G in through. And so, as a learner, relying on reading alone means you are training your eyes, but you are leaving your ears and your mouth completely untrained.
That's a great way to put it.
You could read Shakespeare perfectly in your head, but then pronounce every single proper noun incorrectly.
That's the core issue right there. Reading alone does not build the auditory library that's required for real-time conversation. You have to bridge that visual auditory gap. And the solution that's recommended is beautifully low-tech, but incredibly effective because it taps into the brain's simultaneous processing capabilities.
Okay, let's get specific. Here's the method outlined in our source material. It relies on introducing dual input in a very controlled way.
Dual input.
Yes. Combining reading a physical or a digital book with simultaneously listening to the professional audiobook version of that text at the exact same moment.
The learner has to consume both inputs synchronously. You track the words on the page with your eyes while your ears are receiving the corresponding sound modeled by a native professional speaker. The beauty of this technique is all about the cognitive connection it creates.
How so?
Well, if you are already a high-level reader, your brain processes the word visually very quickly. But if you've never heard it spoken correctly, your brain kind of holds a question mark over its phonetic structure.
Right, it leaves a blank.
It does. But by injecting the accurate audio track right when your eyes are scanning the spelling, the brain performs an immediate critical mapping function. It forces the visual spelling and the auditory sound to become deeply connected. It creates an indelible imprint.
So it's like creating a direct, reliable circuit between the written symbol and the spoken reality.
Exactly, a direct circuit. And that's where the dual benefit truly shines, doubling your efficiency, which is, essential for the learner who values their time.
Let's talk about that first benefit, the most immediate one. So what happens the next time you encounter that word visually?
Yes.
Let's say you see the word epitome written down, E-P-I-T-O-M-E. A lot of learners might see that and think, epitome.
A very common mistake.
But if you've listened to it while reading it, you know instantly that the E on the end isn't silent, and it's pronounced epitome. The mystery of the spelling is solved forever because you have the correct native model in your memory bank.
And the second benefit, which is so crucial for real-life communication, works in reverse. It tackles listening comprehension. So the next time you are in a meeting and you hear that word spoken quickly, maybe slightly muffled, or amidst background chatter,
Which happens all the time.
all the time, you will know exactly how it is spelled, what it means, and how it is constructed. This is vital for taking notes, for accurate memory, and for the internal confidence that you didn't just hear a noise, but a specific, identifiable piece of vocabulary.
So you know the word is ubiquitous and not a big quitus, which is a common auditory confusion point I've heard about.
That's a perfect example. You're no longer mishearing things because the auditory shape of the word is now familiar and linked to a specific spelling in your mind.
So this technique is about building confidence in both directions, from the written page to the spoken sound, and from the spoken sound back to the written page. But the source material gives a very specific starting suggestion, which I think is important for the learner not to overlook.
It's a very subtle but profound piece of advice. They suggest using a book you have already read or one you are highly interested in reading.
Why is that so important?
Because if you use a book you already know, you remove the cognitive burden of trying to understand an entirely new plot, new characters, and new concepts. You can focus 100% of your brain power strictly on the linguistic mechanism itself, that sound spelling mapping. It just smooths the learning curve significantly.
That's a fantastic piece of foundational strategy. I think we've really covered the how there. So let's shift gears dramatically from the learning methodology to the specific high-impact vocabulary that instantly boosts native fluency.
Let's do it.
We're diving into 20 idioms, starting with a cluster focused on actions, effort, and scale.
And as we transition, it's good to remember these are not just, ornamental phrases. These 20 idioms are high-frequency, universally understood concepts that native speakers use for linguistic efficiency. Mastering them lets you compress complex ideas into recognizable linguistic shorthand.
Saving you 5 minutes of explanation in a single sentence.
That's the goal.
We begin with number 1, an idiom defined by scale and inadequacy. A drop in the ocean. It paints such a clear, immediate picture of vastness.
Precisely. The definition is very straightforward. A very small or insignificant part of something big or whole. It's a metaphor designed specifically to communicate relative scale, and more often than not, to communicate a sense of inadequacy or frustration with that scale.
The example provided in the source material really highlights the rhetorical power of this phrase by juxtaposing enormous numbers. It said, the government's pledge to increase health funding by $100 million is a drop in the ocean compared to the billions that need to be spent.
And that juxtaposition is the entire point. On its own, $100 million is a huge, meaningful number. But when the context is a massive systemic problem that requires billions,
It becomes nothing.
it's rendered functionally useless. So when you hear this phrase, you are hearing an instant qualitative assessment that the effort or the resource is not just small, but woefully insufficient to solve the problem at hand. It conveys a sense of powerlessness, or at least severe frustration with the small scale of the attempt.
And we see this used in all registers too, from discussions of national policy, like that health funding example, right down to personal finance.
Oh, absolutely.
You could say, my $5 savings from this coupon is a drop in the ocean compared to the debt I have to pay off. It's incredibly versatile.
And you touch on an important point there, the register. While it can be used formally, it also fits perfectly into casual conversation, sometimes even with variations like a mere drop or just a drop. It instantly communicates the size of the challenge relative to the size of the contribution.
Moving to number 2, we shift from scale to effort, to bend over backwards. This one describes a really extreme level of exertion.
It means to do whatever it takes to help someone. It suggests a degree of physical or mental contortion that is difficult, unnatural, or, excessive. It implies going far beyond what is considered necessary or standard. And what's crucial for the learner here is recognizing the dual context that's presented in the source, because this idiom carries a lot of emotional weight. It can be used both positively and negatively.
It can.
In a positive light, the source gave the example. Our company is bending over backwards to satisfy our customers. That implies tremendous laudable effort and a real dedication to service.
But the negative use is arguably more common in interpersonal conflict or lament. It's used to express excessive, unrewarded effort or a critical lack of appreciation. The lament from the source was, I've been bending over backwards trying to solve his problems, and he hasn't even given me the time of day.
That is such a powerful combination of phrases. We have to pause for a second on that related concept that the source defined, to give someone the time of day. Yes, that's an idiom in its own right. It just means to give someone proper attention, respect, or acknowledgement. So the negative use of bending over backwards is specifically when your gargantuan effort isn't even met with that basic level of respect.
So it communicates a deep injustice.
A deep injustice. I did everything for you, and you couldn't even spare me 5 minutes. It captures the bitterness of unreciprocated effort and highlights a transactional failure in the relationship.
That's a fantastic analysis of the nuance there. Okay, let's look at number 3, which describes overcommitment. To bite off more than you can chew. I think every driven person recognizes this feeling instantly.
Yes. This means to take on a task that is simply too big, too complex, or too demanding for your current capacity. The imagery is visceral. If you physically bite off more food than your mouth can process, you will choke. It's a perfect metaphor for professional or academic overload.
And the source provided a great anecdotal example that really grounds this in a relatable context of an overwhelming workload. The example describes someone juggling a university degree, working part-time, maintaining a YouTube channel, and taking on extra project work.
I mean, that's a recipe for burnout right there.
Absolutely.
That paints a picture of extreme overextension. The person in the scenario acknowledged, I think I've bitten off more than I can chew with this project. I haven't slept properly in 3 weeks.
But the source material added an interesting caveat, didn't it?
It did. It added that the person suffered consequences, burnout, stress, maybe bad grades, but ultimately felt the effort was worth it. This shows how the idiom communicates the initial risk and pain inherent in ambition. You're taking on too much, but sometimes that struggle leads to a significant payoff. It's the key phrase for discussing capacity limits and risk assessment in high-pressure environments.
So if you are feeling overwhelmed, saying, I bit off more than I can chew, is a socially acceptable way of admitting you need to scale back or maybe ask for help without sounding like a failure.
Exactly. It validates the difficulty of the task itself. It frames the problem as an issue of capacity relative to the task size rather than personal incompetence.
That wraps up our first cluster on effort and scale. We've seen how we describe huge professional efforts and contributions. Now, let's talk about the effort we put into relationships and social dynamics, specifically when trust breaks down or conflict arises.
Yes.
We're moving into cluster 2, trust, conflict, and accountability.
And these are highly emotive phrases. They condense complex moral. They are, often deployed when communication needs to be direct, usually during a moment of confrontation or high tension.
Number 4, actions speak louder than words. This is a classic idiom and one that feels universally true across many cultures.
The definition is crystal clear.
Yeah.
It is better to actually do something rather than just talk about it. The idiom prioritizes observable, tangible behavior over verbal guarantees or empty apologies.
And the application here is vital because it really defines the register. The source suggests using this in a fight with someone who has lost your trust. And the example is high stakes. Stop apologizing to me and prove to me that I could trust you. Actions speak louder than words.
That statement is not a gentle suggestion. It's a demand. It's a demand for tangible behavioral evidence of change. When someone uses this, they are signaling that verbal communication, the apology, the promise, it's lost all its currency.
The words don't mean anything anymore.
They don't. Trust can only be rebuilt through verifiable effort. So if you hear this, you know the speaker is at a critical breaking point. They are demanding a shift from the theoretical, which is words, to the practical, which is actions.
I do wonder, though, does using this phrase ever feel a little unfair? I mean, sometimes a genuine apology is an action in itself.
That's a great probing question. And
Right.
yes, while it's usually used correctly, it can sometimes be a rhetorical shortcut to shut down dialogue. If the other person genuinely doesn't know what action to take, the idiom can feel like an impossible demand. But in its purest usage, it's a reminder that intentions must be backed by consistent, observable behavior. The cultural implication is that the English-speaking world places immense value on demonstrated reliability.
Okay, next. Number 5, describing escalation. To add fuel to the fire.
This means to make a problem worse or to exacerbate a tense situation. It's the opposite of de-escalation. It describes the introduction of an element that makes an already heated situation, well, explode or burn hotter.
The source provides a fantastic cautionary example that focuses on prevention using the idiom as a warning.
What was it?
Don't tell her about the delays, you'll just be adding fuel to the fire.
And that shows its practical application in interpersonal risk management. The fire is the existing problem. Perhaps an already stressed client or an angry colleague. The fuel is the new negative information, the delays.
So you're managing the situation.
You are. Using this phrase communicates a direct, pragmatic warning to prevent the situation from deteriorating further. If you use this, you are predicting a negative escalation because you know the emotional tolerance of the person involved has been exceeded. You are advising silence to maintain stability.
Moving on to number 6, the great equalizer. It takes two to tango.
This one is fascinating because it's almost always deployed when assigning or discussing blame. The definition implies that complex actions or communications, especially negative ones, require more than one person. Two parties are inherently involved in the outcome.
And the crucial example provided in the source is weighty, dealing directly with shared fault in a really difficult situation. Don't just blame him for the affair. It takes two to tango.
That example perfectly illustrates its function. It's used to push back against single-party blame. The dance metaphor suggests coordinated mutual movement. You cannot dance the tango with only one person, therefore you cannot have a complex relational failure without two participants. It is a powerful tool for forcing a broader, more truthful, albeit sometimes painful perspective on fault.
But I have to ask again, doesn't using this phrase sometimes feel like avoidance or deflection? If one person initiated the affair and the other person enabled it, they are not equally responsible. Is this phrase sometimes just used to distribute blame to feel better?
That is precisely the nuance a high-level learner needs to grasp. While it can be used to genuinely encourage shared accountability, it is also frequently deployed defensively to minimize one person's primary fault by pointing out the secondary actions of the other.
So context is key.
The context is everything. If someone is genuinely trying to analyze a conflict where both parties made mistakes, like a failed business partnership, it's constructive. If it's used to minimize severe wrongdoing, it can feel cheap and deflective. Its strength lies in its ability to highlight mutual involvement, but its weakness is its inability to measure the degree of fault.
That makes perfect sense. It's a blunt instrument for accountability. Finally, in this trust cluster, number 7, to sell someone out.
This means to snitch on someone, or more broadly, to let their secret out, resulting in a violation of confidentiality and loyalty. It nearly always results in harm or severe embarrassment to the person whose secret was revealed.
And the source emphasizes the context of violated trust, which is key to its emotional impact. I can't believe you sold me out like that, used after information was explicitly asked to be kept confidential.
That captures the feeling of profound betrayal. You trusted someone to protect your secret or your vulnerability, and they chose to profit or simply relieve themselves of the burden by exposing you. This phrase is distinct from simply telling a secret. Selling out often implies that the betrayer gained something.
Even if it was just favor with someone else.
Exactly. Even if it was just the favor of the person they told, it is a very harsh judgment on someone's character, communicating a loss of faith that is difficult to recover from, whether it's in a corporate setting about confidential mergers or among friends about a personal vulnerability.
We'll transition now into Cluster 3, which is focused on decisions, opportunities, and performance, the language of moving forward, seizing chances, and achieving goals. These idioms are fantastic for discussing momentum.
This cluster deals explicitly with timing, motivation, and the seizing of chances. They are essential phrases for driving conversations forward, especially negotiations or project management.
And number 8 kicks us off with a clear sports metaphor that implies a transfer of control. The ball is in your court.
It means it is your turn to make the next step or decision. The image is drawn directly from tennis or basketball, where the momentum and responsibility are literally transferred to the opposing side. It implies a moment of expectation and agency.
The scenario provided makes the context very specific. I've done all I can do. I've sent the final proposal. The ball is in your court now.
And that context is vital. This isn't a generic statement about timing. It is used specifically when one party has completed their preparatory work, their action, or their negotiation, and is now waiting for the other party to respond or finalize the deal.
So it puts the pressure on them.
It communicates completion on one side and the initiation of pressure on the other. For the listener, it's a moment of empowerment. You have control, but also pressure. The delay is now on you.
Number 9 deals with the opposite of momentum regret over a lost chance. To miss the boat.
The definition is straightforward. To miss the opportunity to do something. The imagery suggests a missed departure. The chance was momentary and has now sailed away. It communicates the finality of the temporal loss.
And the specific context provided illustrates the gravity of this. I think you've missed the boat on that application. They've already started interviewing candidates.
That clearly conveys that not only has the deadline passed, but the hiring process has moved into the next stage, making the opportunity completely, irrevocably gone. You could apply next year, but you cannot seize that specific opportunity again.
It's a heavy phrase.
It is emotionally heavy, yes. It is often used when discussing career pivots, investment decisions, or even dating, where unique opportunities have a very short, closed window.
Next, number 10, describing neutrality in a charged situation. To be on the fence.
This means to stay neutral and to not take sides in a debate or conflict. The fence imagery suggests someone perched precariously between two options, unwilling to commit, perhaps out of caution or indecision.
The source provides a crucial motivation for this neutrality. I'm sitting on the fence on this one. I don't want to offend anyone.
And that reveals a lot about its common usage. While sitting on the fence can imply genuine indecision, like trying to choose between two equally good job offers, it often, as in this example, describes a deliberate diplomatic choice.
A choice motivated by a desire for peace or conflict avoidance.
Exactly. The speaker prioritizes harmony over taking a potentially polarizing yet necessary stance. The implication is often, I see both sides, and taking a stand right now is just too costly for me.
Finally, for this cluster, number 11 focused on demanding better results. To step up one's game.
This means to start performing better, often because current efforts or results are insufficient. It's a direct call for higher standards, originating from sports, but now used universally by managers, mentors, and in self-help contexts.
The source links this improvement directly to a reward or goal setting, which makes it an incentive. If you really want to get this promotion, you'll need to step up your game.
The implication is clear. The current level of performance is fine for your current role, but entirely insufficient to achieve the desired promotion. To step up suggests elevating effort, quality, or commitment to meet a specific higher benchmark. It is actionable feedback, phrased idiomatically, and it requires the listener to reassess their strategic approach, not just their effort level. It's about moving from good to great.
We've hit the midpoint of our idiom deep dive. Let's move to cluster 4, focusing on results, clarity, and understanding idioms that describe outcomes, whether successful or confusing, and the difficulty of cognitive processes.
These phrases are vital for summarizing and assessing experiences, how hard something was, how close you came to failure, or how much effort was required to comprehend a complex idea.
Starting with number 12, which contains some very, very bizarre physical imagery. By the skin of one's teeth.
The image is indeed strange. It refers to the skin of teeth, which really just means the surface, the enamel, or essentially nothing at all. The meaning, however, is clear and potent, to only just succeed by a very narrow margin.
The source perfectly captures this meaning in the context of academic pressure. I might have passed that exam by the skin of my teeth, only just. That only just at the end really reinforces the closeness of the call to failure.
It communicates a close encounter with disaster. If the margin had been even slightly smaller, the outcome would have been negative. It implies luck, stress, or insufficient preparation, but ultimately the successful outcome was achieved, however, barely.
It's a phrase for relief.
It's a phrase used to express immense relief, often mixed with a nervous laugh after navigating a great risk. It's the linguistic equivalent of a near miss.
Number 13 is the complete opposite in terms of difficulty assessment. A piece of cake.
Meaning, really easy. It's a simple, high-frequency assessment of difficulty, comparing the ease of a task to the pleasant, effortless experience of eating a favorite dessert.
The application is straightforward, often used to just dismiss a challenge. That pop quiz was a piece of cake.
For the learner, this is one of the most useful phrases for giving simple, confident feedback on the difficulty of any task, from driving a car to assembling furniture. It communicates success without struggle and often carries a lighthearted, almost bragging tone.
Number 14 gets a little more cerebral, describing cognitive effort, to get one's head around something.
This means to come to understand something, to work to understand something, or to synthesize information into a coherent framework. It implies a mental struggle to incorporate or reconcile new information that might conflict with your existing knowledge.
The example provided highlights the necessary effort and time investment, showing this is not a passive process. I'm going to spend a night trying to get my head around this new legislation.
That time investment is key. It indicates that the legislation or the physics theory or the complex social dynamic is dense, complicated, or counterintuitive. It requires dedicated time and focused cognitive effort. It suggests a process of intellectual wrestling until the concept finally clicks into place.
It was more than just memorizing.
Oh, much more. It validates the difficulty of the subject matter while confirming the speaker's commitment to mastering the nuance, not just the definition. It differs from memorization. It requires a genuine cognitive shift.
Finally, number 15, focused on efficiency in communication and often used in high-stakes moments. To cut to the chase.
This means to leave out all of the unnecessary background details and just get straight to the main point. It's a linguistic command often used when time is short, patience is thin, or the subject matter is unpleasant and needs immediate delivery.
And the example used for direct communication suggests it's often employed when delivering a difficult or sensitive main point, minimizing filler. To cut to the chase, I'm not comfortable working alongside John anymore.
That context is powerful because it establishes seriousness immediately. By using to cut to the chase, the speaker signals two things. First, that they recognize they have important, potentially unpleasant news to deliver, and second, that they value the listener's time and want to minimize anxiety by skipping the preamble.
So it's a preface to something serious.
It is a preface to seriousness, demanding immediate, focused attention. However, a learner must be careful not to overuse it, as in certain highly formal or polite settings, it can sound abrupt or even rude.
Right, good point. We now transition to our penultimate section, Cluster 5, focusing on communication style, warnings, rumors, and temperament. These are the idioms for managing social and emotional dynamics.
This group includes phrases that deal with integrity in communication, managing distress, and expressing patience or tolerance. They are, vital for navigating the subtleties of workplace and social scenarios.
Starting with number 16, which is derived directly from a foundational ethical story, to cry wolf.
This means to call for help when you don't actually need it, which leads to a loss of credibility. The power of this idiom relies entirely on the cultural recognition of its source material, the Aesop fable, which the source material helpfully provided.
Right, the source gave the full fable detail. A shepherd boy kept pretending there was a wolf, causing people to come running to help him. When a real wolf did eventually appear, he cried for help again, but no one came because they thought he was lying again.
That origin story explains why the idiom is so damning. It communicates a total loss of credibility. When used in a modern context, such as the example, "My new flatmate is always crying wolf."
What does that imply?
It implies that the flatmate's frequent minor emergencies, say a minor headache or a small inconvenience, have devalued their legitimate requests for assistance. The warning is clear. Repeated false alarms lead to genuine isolation and distrust in a real crisis.
Number 17 deals with information that lacks official verification. To hear on the grapevine.
This means to hear a rumor or an unconfirmed story. The imagery of the grapevine suggests information traveling rapidly and somewhat haphazardly from person to person without any official source or verification. It's been used for centuries, possibly related to the chaotic, tangled nature of early telegraph wires, though its etymology is even older.
And the example given is a very common workplace rumor regarding personnel changes. I heard on the grapevine that our receptionist will be leaving us soon.
Crucially, this phrase acts as a social shield and a disclaimer. When you use it, you are signaling to the listener that the information may be true, but you are not personally vouching for its veracity.
You're just passing it on.
You are simply passing on something you acquired indirectly. It allows you to introduce potentially valuable, sensitive information without taking personal responsibility for its truthfulness. It's excellent for hedging your bets in a professional or social setting.
Number 18 is a high-intensity demand for emotional control. Pull yourself together.
This means to calm down and act normally. It's a phrase normally said when someone is visibly distressed, stressing out, overwhelmed, or momentarily losing composure. It implies that the person is emotionally fractured and needs to reassemble their wits.
And the example reflects this interventionist context. I think you need to pull yourself together and stop stressing about the presentation. You know the material perfectly.
It is an active intervention intended to snap someone out of a state of panic or excessive worry. While it can sound abrupt, it carries the force of a command aimed at restoring equilibrium. It suggests that the person's current emotional state is counterproductive to the task at hand. It is typically used by someone who cares but who needs the other person to be functional. A coach, a manager, or a close friend who sees the panic spiral beginning.
The number 19 is pretty much the opposite of number 18 in terms of emotional demand. It's a plea for tolerance, to cut somebody some slack.
This means to give someone a break or to stop judging them so hard or demanding perfection from them. It is a plea for patience, tolerance, and understanding, recognizing that everyone operates under pressure or is going through a learning process.
The context provided is perfect for demanding patience during a learning curve. You need to cut the intern some slack. They are still learning how the system works.
That phrase acknowledges that the intern is likely making mistakes, but it argues that those mistakes are expected and part of the process. It pushes the listener toward empathy, reminding them that the intern's current performance is not their final, matured performance. It's an essential phrase for establishing a supportive, functional environment where new people are allowed to fail and learn without immediate penalty.
We've reached the final idiom on our list, number 20, which is incredibly useful for admitting ignorance efficiently. And then we have one bonus nugget before we wrap up our analysis.
This last idiom is great for preventing those awkward silences when faced with an unanswerable question.
Number 20. Your guess is as good as mine.
Simple, direct, and universally understood. It just means, I don't know, or I have no idea. Crucially, it implies that the question is inherently difficult to answer, or that the answer relies on pure speculation, which makes the listener's opinion equally valid.
And the context provided highlights its use when certainty or data is lacking. We just don't have enough data on the next quarter's performance. Your guess is as good as mine.
When a speaker uses this, they are confirming that the necessary information to answer a question is unavailable to both parties. It closes the conversation loop by admitting mutual ignorance, often in a polite, humble, or slightly humorous way. It shows a shared lack of insight rather than an individual failure to know the answer.
That completes the 20 essential idioms. But before we move to our final thought, we got a bonus concept incidentally defined in the source material during the wrap-up notes, a common, slightly confusing phrase that we could quickly define for completeness.
Yes.
Spur of the moment.
Yes, not spare, but spur. S-P-U-R. This is a highly useful phrase to know. Spur of the moment means on impulse, or without advanced planning. It's used to describe spontaneous action or a decision made without much forethought. Like, for example, we decided to drive to the beach on the spur of the moment. It adds a great final, unexpected nugget of fluency to the toolkit, connecting impulse to action.
That brings us to the summary and application. So what does this entire deep dive mean for you, the learner, who is seeking a fast track to fluency?
Well, we covered two main guaranteed areas for an immediate boost to your fluency and your confidence. First, that specific learning technique, combining reading with simultaneous listening to master the non-phonetic nature of English pronunciation and dramatically improve comprehension.
That's the long-term skill builder.
That is your long-term structural skill builder.
And second, we armed you with 20 high-value idioms linguistic shortcuts that enable you to compress complex concepts about trust, effort, scale, and accountability into fluid, native speech patterns.
And the value here is immediate applicability, ensuring that knowledge gain is quick and thorough.
So now for the application.
The application. The source provided official homework, and we're going to pass it directly on to you because knowledge not applied is, well, it's knowledge wasted. The challenge is this. Write 5 sentences using 5 of your favorite idioms that we discussed today, focusing on putting them into a realistic context.
And we'd encourage you to go further, fostering that mutual learning process we always encourage in the deep dive community. Consider adding sentences, using additional idioms you've heard native speakers use outside of our list. Share your findings with someone else learning the language. Try to explain the idiom's origin or nuance to solidify your own mastery.
And we'll leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over as you work on your sentences. We discussed powerful idioms like actions speak louder than words, meaning we prioritize observed behavior over spoken guarantees.
And it takes two to tango,
Yeah.
which distributes accountability for complex interactions.
So think about this.
If a language relies so heavily on these complex, implied understandings, these idioms that summarize relational weight, betrayal, or commitment, how much of everyday English communication relies on nonverbal cues and implied cultural understanding that these idioms help clarify?
Does a culture that uses idiomatic expression frequently also inherently value efficiency and sometimes indirectness in speech, trusting that the listener will grasp the full, rich context packed into a phrase like a drop in the ocean without needing a long, literal explanation?
The idiom is the shortcut.
It is, but it relies on a shared cultural context to function. How much cultural data is hiding inside these phrases?
That is the deep connection between language and culture. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into fluency and the shortcuts to sounding like a native speaker. Go write those sentences, and we will see you next time for another deep dive into the information that matters.
Farewell for now.